what does it look like for me to struggle well in my recovery? And what in the world does that even mean? I know that's something that I've wrestled with a lot in my recovery journey. But what if the answer to that is a whole lot more simpler than I try to make it out to be?
Recovery can be hard, but it's worth it. There is hope knowing we can find healing one step at a time with Jesus and healthy community. Whether you're struggling with a hurt or a hang-up or a habit, you're not alone. During this podcast, we share real stories, practical tools, and powerful truths that inspire you to keep moving forward. No matter where you are on your journey, there's hope ahead. So stick with us as we walk this path together through Celebrate Recovery.
Well, welcome back to Hope in Recovery, a Fellowship Celebrate Recovery podcast, where we talk life change stories and recovery conversations designed to push us further down our road of healing and hope as we walk towards Jesus in this crazy and incredible journey that we call recovery. And I'm super, super glad that you're with us today. If it's your first time here, awesome. I'm so glad that you stumbled on this. If you've been listening for a while, thanks for coming back. We love having you here and being a part of these conversations. And as always, if you get something out of it, like, subscribe, follow, share, whatever vernacular is in whatever platform area you're listening to or watching this on. I'm really excited for today's conversation around what does it look like for me to struggle well. I remember the first time I kind of heard that phraseology of recovery isn't designed to make me a perfect person. It's designed to help me to struggle well, to struggle with integrity, to be able to lean into my shortcomings and the way that God wants to change me and allow myself to grow in his grace. And so what does it look like to do that practically? I know for so much of my life, one of the kind of animating things within me is I want to do this thing right. Whether that was in school with my grades, whether that was in playing sports and making the team and making first string, whether that was in music and college, whether that's been in my professional life. How do I make sure that I do it well and I do it right? And I think I leaned into my recovery that way early on, and honestly, it's cropped up plenty of times over the past few years. Is man, I want to make sure that I'm nailing this recovery thing. The hard thing about recovery is that recovery isn't cut and dry. Yes, sometimes it's very clear to be able to divine sobriety in a relapse. Yes, there are a set of principles and steps that help us walk through this. Yes, there is choices that I make that will draw me closer to God or further away from God. There are some of those things in there. But one of the things about us being a broken person living in a broken world is that there's always going to be something that God is working in our hearts and in our lives to change us, to make us look more like Jesus. If we are living on this side of heaven, then we're not done yet. And that's both a really freeing thing because it means that it's okay for me to not be okay. Because all of us aren't okay in some sense of the word. But it's also kind of a really frustrating idea because I know for me, I want to get the right answer. I want to do it right. I want to make sure that I've got it all buckled down and I'm nailing this thing. So what does that look like for me to lean into growth with God, to acknowledge the reality of my struggles and learn how to struggle well? What does it look like for me to struggle well? I think it's kind of easy to say, what is not struggling well? What do we mean? What do we not mean when we say struggling well? Well, first off, it doesn't mean perfection. Perfection, the only perfect person is Jesus. He was the only one that ever lived a sinless life. He was the only one that stepped into temptation and never fell to temptation. Jesus is the only perfect person. If I was perfect, then I wouldn't need Jesus. And thank God I'm not perfect so that I can have a relationship with Jesus. Thank God that he's there to pick me up when I fail. And so struggling well, it doesn't mean perfection. In fact, oftentimes, many times over the course of the walking through the Celebrate Recovery curriculum, you will see the phrase that we are after progress, not perfection, because perfection happens on the other side of heaven. And so it doesn't mean perfection. Struggling well also doesn't mean that I never have seasons where it's hard. And that seems kind of, it may seem a little Captain Obvious. I mean, we're talking about struggling well. But I think there's been times in my life, and I'm sure there's some folks listening to this that can relate, where I felt like, man, if I've been doing this thing a certain while, then there's certain ways that I just shouldn't struggle anymore. I shouldn't be afraid to let people into things that are going on. I shouldn't let this temptation that I felt like I have licked, I shouldn't ever even be tempted to go to that again. I shouldn't, whatever you want to fill in the box with. It's this idea that now that I've reached this level, I should be immune to whatever unrealistic expectations I have with myself. And that's not struggling well. That's developing unrealistic expectations towards myself. Now, struggling well also doesn't mean that we just give ourselves license to go and indulge. It doesn't mean that it's like, I'm struggling, and so it's okay. I'm struggling. I'm going to go and hang out with those friends that my old drinking buddies and go drinking with them. That doesn't mean I can just say, oh yeah, I'm not going to worry about fighting this behavior. I'm not going to worry about this. I'm struggling well. It's fine. Struggling well is not a license for me to go and do the things that get me stuck in those cycles of insanity. It's not license. It's not freedom for me to go and run to things that are things that pull me away from my relationship with God and others. And so what is struggling well? What does it look like to struggle well? Well, I think from my brain, as I've been thinking through this, and I think there's a lot of answers to this. I think I want to answer the question of, am I struggling well, with four kind of evaluative questions. And these aren't the exhaustive list there. And there's probably plenty of people that got a lot of other insight on this, but this is what I'm thinking. And so rather than giving a definite answer, let me ask this. How can I tell if I'm struggling well? Well, number one, am I showing up? That seems like base level kind of, it almost seems like kind of silly to say this, but like, am I actually showing up? Am I showing up for myself? Am I showing up to group? Am I going to my step study? Am I prioritizing meetings? Am I actually showing up? Another way to say this would be, am I engaging in the process? If I am not allowing myself to take advantage of all of the things that draw me closer to God, that keep me moving forward in this process of recovery, then that could be an indication that maybe I could be struggling a little bit better. Am I showing up? Am I present? Am I engaged? And am I responsive to what God is doing in those spaces? It reminds me a little bit of the story of Samuel in the Old Testament, where uh, Samuel, as a little boy, was in the temple, and uh, he heard a voice in the middle of the night, and he got up, and I believe he went and talked to Eli, who was the prophet, the priest there, and said, "Hey, did you call me in here?" And Eli's like, "What are you doing, kid? Go back to bed." But it happens again as he tries to go to sleep, and he gets up, and Eli's like, "Dude, I'm not talking to you. Go back to bed." And then when he gets up the third time, Eli goes, "Oh, wait a second," which first off is super encouraging, because I feel like it takes me a couple times to realize actually what's going on, just life in general. But Eli realized, he's like, "Oh, Samuel, God is talking to you. Here's what you do. Go in there and say, 'Lord, speak, for your servant is listening.'" And that's what Samuel goes and does. And I think that's a really good posture of showing up. It's not just that I'm showing up begrudgingly, but I will say, like, even if your butt's in the seat and you're there in the room, that's a good first start. And we say often in recovery, if you get your rear end going in the right direction, your head and your heart will eventually follow. If you can get in the seat, your head and your heart is going to be there by default. Now, as I'm sitting in that seat, am I taking that same posture as Samuel? "Lord, speak, for your servant is listening." God, I want to take in everything that you have for me. It's and one of the drivers behind me showing up is also the conviction that God has already shown up. He's already trying to say something to me today. And so am I seeking to hear what he's saying? And so I think in this question, there's an element of intentionality. There's an element of prioritizing my time and what I'm leaning into. And then there's also an element of prioritizing my own growth. Uh, I have to acknowledge that there's areas I need to grow so that I can show up in the places that are designed to help me grow. So am I showing up? I think that's a pretty simple first question. And then the second one is this. Am I being honest? Am I allowing myself to be gut level honest about the things that are going on in my life? We'll talk a little bit more about that right after the break.
Hey, Forever family. Being in a community of fellow strugglers who are committed to working their recoveries is essential to our success in having victory over our hurts, hangups, and habits. Every Friday night, we have a Celebrate Recovery meeting at Fellowship Fayetteville and Fellowship Rogers. At 6 p.m., we have a great meal for connection with other recovery brothers and sisters. Then we meet for large group at 7 p.m., followed by an open share group at 8. Same schedule on both campuses. Different teachers, different worship teams, but the same great experience. We'd love for you to join us this Friday night. It's never too late to start or start over again. For more information, go to fellowshipcr.org.
All right, we're back continuing this conversation of what does it look like for me to struggle well in my recovery? First question we ask, first evaluative question, and am I showing up? Second one is, as I show up, am I being honest? In my step study group, we just finished up the confess lesson. It's a little bit further down the road from where we are on Friday nights right now. But I love the confess lesson. One of the verses that's tied into that, it's so good, is James 5:16, where it says, "Therefore confess your sins to one another and pray for one another so that you may be healed." And the reality that as we confess, as we're honest about the things that are going on in our heart and our life, the result of that is healing. Not forgiveness, because we've already been forgiven in Jesus, but as we confess, we find healing. And I think there's something really important in that. Because in order to confess things, that means I've got to be honest about those things. And so uh, I'm reminded too of one of the lessons that I had to learn. And honestly, I have to keep relearning in my recovery is the reality that hiding will never lead to healing. Hidden stories don't heal. The stories that we refuse to tell are the stories that refuse to heal. And I've got to be willing to allow myself to say the thing that needs to be said. And I think we can sometimes allow ourselves to just be content with sharing the 99% of what we think needs to be said. But we hold back that one thing. Could it be the case that that one thing is the thing that's holding us back? That 1% really is hindering us more than we give it credit for, and more than we think it is. And it makes sense that that 1% that we might want to hold back is really it may be really scary. It may feel really risky to throw that out there. It may be that thing where we're thinking to ourselves, you know what? This is the one thing I can take to the grave. This is the detail I don't want to share. This is the thing that if I say it, then they're finally going to go, all right, Andy, hey, can you step out in the hallway? Because that was a bombshell. Could it be on the other side of sharing that 1%, there's a whole lot of freedom? That on the other side of risk, there's freedom and growth. The things that I'm not willing to bring out into the light will live in the darkness. And as it lives in the darkness, the shame that gives it power is going to grow. The fear that keeps me from laying it out there is going to keep growing. One of the most important things that we can do for our recovery journey is allow ourselves to risk being honest. And so, am I being honest? If I'm being honest, that's a good thing. That's the right choice. And so, where are you at? I love what it says in Ephesians. It says, do not lie to one another, for you've taken off the old self and put on the new. It's pretty straightforward. Where am I trying to deceive myself and others rather than bringing it out into the light? So that's the second question. Am I being honest? The third question that I like with that, and so am I showing up? Am I being honest? And as I'm showing up and as I'm being honest, am I allowing God to push me? Am I allowing God to push me out of my comfort zone? Am I allowing God to respond to what I'm bringing to him? And this is where we start to maybe in our recovery journeys, we start to pick up on things that maybe other people are doing, or we start to glean wisdom from the process. As we answer our questions in step study, as we share and open share, we start to feel God pushing us towards maybe different ways of acting and different ways of behaving. And if you've been in recovery for any amount of time, there are things that we hear and things that we feel as we are engaging in group that maybe cause a little bit of discomfort for us. Like maybe that happened for you when I asked, hey, are you being honest? There's that 1%. Are you sharing it? It was one of the things for me when I heard, man, hey, maybe you need some software on your phone so that people can have some extra accountability. Maybe these things that maybe push us beyond our comfort zone, maybe rub up against our pride a little bit. And we know that God is saying, hey, son or daughter, this is the thing that I want. This is the thing that I'm pressing into your heart to listen to me about. You know, Oftentimes, I remember years ago, Rodney was sharing this with me and some other folks, is that uh, oftentimes in our recovery, one of the things that we can be more concerned about in our pain is relief rather than growth. And there's a difference between relief and growth. Relief is concerned primarily with the removal of pain and discomfort. It's concerned with us getting out of the really hard, uncomfortable thing so that we can feel better. But growth is about us getting better. It's about us growing and maturing and deepening. And God is more concerned with our growth than he is our relief or our comfort. In fact, God may use the discomfort, and oftentimes he does, the discomfort of our lives to grow us. So much of recovery is learning how to let old strategies die so that we can allow new strategies to grow. And so, am I allowing God to push me? When I feel like God is calling me into something uncomfortable, is my first reaction, I don't want that. I've had to learn that whenever that instance comes up in my heart, that's actually confirmation to me that that's probably the step that I need to take, because it's the thing that I don't want to do. And, when we look in the Bible, one of the things that we realize is that because of the sin nature that we carry around as broken human beings, we naturally don't desire the things that God has designed to be best for us. We naturally don't normally desire those things. And so when I am considering the brokenness in my life, the things that I'm struggling with, the things that are going on, and my first reaction is, I don't want to make that change. I don't want to do that. Oftentimes that's my own pride, my own flesh, my own heart fighting against the way that the Spirit of God in me is wanting to change me. And so this reminds me of a reality that is all across the Bible, that God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. And in asking, am I allowing God to push me? It's not that my growth is dependent upon how well I do the thing that God is asking me to do, pushing me to do. It's about how much I'm willing to surrender to the direction that he wants me to go. In James 4:6, it says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. In James 4:10, it says, humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. In Proverbs, it says that a pride comes before the fall. But time and time again, we see in Scripture that God's favorite place to work is a humble heart. Am I willing to admit, God, I need you? And it seems like you're calling me into a way that feels different than my own plan. And I'm going to choose to humble myself. I'm going to choose to lean not on my own understanding, as it says in Proverbs, and follow you. Am I allowing God to push me? And then finally, the last question is this. Am I looking to Jesus? Now that one seems almost as Captain Obvious and kind of ambiguous some of the first one there of like, am I showing up? What does that even look like? What does that mean? What does it mean that am I looking to Jesus? Now, what do I mean by this? It doesn't mean, am I looking at a picture of Jesus every day with my own physical eyes? No, it means am I looking at Jesus in the attitude of my heart? Am I trying to live each day in dependence upon and in connection with Jesus? And here's what I think of. Here's why that's so important. Because I think one of the things that we can tend to do in our recovery is we can be far more concerned with how far we've grown or how much we've grown than the direction that we're growing in. Hebrews 12:1, it says this. This is the beginning of the book of Hebrews, or beginning of chapter 12 in the book of Hebrews. It says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off the sin that so easily entangles and everything that hinders us, and let us run this race that he has marked out for us with perseverance, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. This Christian life, and I think that passage in Hebrews is such a great imagery of just this recovery journey, that we are trying to throw off all of the things that are keeping us from running well this race that God has marked out for us. This journey of this life as we seek to live in relationship with God and others in a way that is honoring to God. But what's so key is that as we run that race, we do so looking towards something. Our eyes are fixed on the destination. But so often in my recovery journey, I get more concerned about trying to see how far down the track I've run. Now, it's important to notice our progress. But if we get so hyper-focused with how much have I grown with each step, what we try to do is we try to congratulate ourselves for each step. But the reality is that as we're running, we are looking at Jesus. We are putting our hope on him. And as we just keep trying to run towards Jesus, an amazing thing happens. That day after day, step after step, we actually run closer to him. And we realize that we've grown. See, the goal is Jesus, not the distance we've grown. The goal is Jesus. The distance we grow is the fruit of seeking after Jesus. And so, what does it look like to struggle well? Well, am I showing up? Am I present? Am I engaged in the process? And as I'm there, am I being honest? Am I asking God to help me bring the things that are in the dark into the light and allowing God to do what he will in that place? Am I allowing God to keep pushing me and drawing me closer to him? And am I fixing my eyes on Jesus? Because Jesus is the one that changes me, not my own effort. Growth does happen, but it's the fruit of looking towards Jesus and seeking to step towards him each day. If I can focus on those four things, I think I'll be struggling well. It doesn't look like perfection. It doesn't look like now I reach this certain level of arrival and so I never go back to struggling again. No, it looks like looking at Jesus. It looks like showing up. It looks like staying honest. It looks like allowing God to push us into the hard things that we don't want to be pushed into. Let me leave you with this. It can be so easy to be discouraged in our recovery journey. And you may be listening to this and you're like, oh, this is encouraging, Andy, but like, I just feel like I just keep taking one step forward and 87 steps back. We can't change the choices that we've made. All we've got are the choices that are right in front of us. Nobody expects you to be perfect today. Take the next right step forward. And when God shows you the one after that, take it. Small steps in the same direction over time will always yield growth. So stick with it. Philippians chapter 1, verse 6, it says this, that we can be confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. If we are still living and breathing, if our heart is beating in our chest, God is not done with us. And he's going to keep carrying on the good work he started in you. And he's going to do it until we're home with Jesus. That's when we step into perfection. That's when we no longer struggle. And on this side, we learn to struggle well, fixing our eyes on Jesus. Love you all. Thank you so much for spending time with us. If you're looking for a safe place to learn how to struggle well, every single Friday night at 7 o'clock at Fellowship Fayetteville and Fellowship Rogers Celebrate Recovery, there is a forever family of incredible people that would love to walk alongside you to help you know that you're not alone. We're in this together, and that healing, hope, and freedom is possible. Love y'all. See you next time.